Every once in a while, Florida gives us a gift in November, a real chill in the air. Not the barely under 80 kind, but the kind where you walk outside with your coffee, see your breath, and think, this might actually feel like the holidays. That's my favorite kind of morning. The kind that makes you want to move a little slower, talk a little quieter, and start the day with something cooking low and steady. This year, that something is turkey on the Traeger. The smoker's been running since sunrise, steady at 225, a thin trail of applewood smoke curling into the sky. Inside, the kitchen's already full. Pies cooling on the counter, casseroles half prepped, timers ticking in every direction. But outside, it's peaceful. That's what I love about cooking slow, especially during the holidays. You're not rushing from one burner to the next or juggling 6 timers at once. You're tending, waiting, letting the smoke and the heat do their thing while you sip your coffee and breathe for the first time all week. And the best part? Cooking outside frees up the oven inside. Space for sides, bread, desserts, and a little less chaos. It's balance. The calm and the busy, the hot and the cool, the smell of smoke meeting cinnamon and butter in the air. For me, that's the heart of holiday cooking. It's not about getting everything perfect, it's about creating space to actually enjoy the day. Welcome to the Maker's Table Holiday Special Series. Today we're talking about slowing down in the kitchen and around the fire, and what cooking slow can teach us when life feels fast. Welcome back to the Maker's Table Holiday Special Series, part of the Third Shift Crafts podcast. Last week, we talked about small weekend builds, the kind of projects that remind us that simple doesn't mean small. Today, we're taking that same spirit into the kitchen and onto the grill, because I think the same lesson applies here too. The best things take time. And around the holidays, that truth feels more real than ever. Between grocery list timers and too many side dishes, it's easy to let the joy slip away. But the kitchen and the grill can be a kind of reset button if you let them. Cooking slow gives you permission to take your foot off the gas for a bit. Here in Florida, we don't always get that postcard perfect holiday weather, but every now and then, we wake up to a chill that makes everything feel different. The air's crisp, the windows fog just enough to make it cozy, and for a few days it actually feels like fall. When that happens, I can't help but move the cooking outside. There's something about that first puff of smoke from the Traeger or the smell of applewood and spice mixing with the breeze that brings me back to center. For me, slow cooking during the holidays is half practical, half personal. It's practical because it takes some pressure off the kitchen. The turkey or the ham can take its sweet time outside, freeing up the oven for casseroles, pies, and those rolls everyone asks about. But it's personal because it changes the pace of the day. Instead of rushing from the stovetop to the sink, I'm checking the smoker, adjusting the temperature, sipping coffee, maybe flipping through my build list for later in the weekend. It's quiet out there, the kind of quiet that lets you think. And honestly, that's what I think a lot of us are craving this time of year. Not more food, not more noise, just more space. Space to cook, space to breathe, space to let the moment unfold instead of trying to control it. When you're cooking low and slow, you don't really have a choice but to slow down too. Can't rush smoke, can't hurry flavor, and the same patience it takes to cook something right, that's the same kind of patience that keeps a day from flying by in a blur. So that's what today's episode is about. Cooking as a form of slowing down. Making room in the kitchen, in the oven, in your schedule, and maybe even in your head for the things that actually matter. We'll talk about what slow cooking teaches you, how cooking outside can simplify the chaos inside, and why the best memories always happen somewhere between the kitchen door and the back patio. Because if woodworking teaches you patience, and winemaking teaches you time, then cooking teaches you presence. And that's what the holidays need more of. Not perfect food, but present people. There's something almost meditative about cooking. The way time stretches out around you, the quiet hum of heat and smoke, the small rituals that turn a recipe into a rhythm. When you're cooking low and slow, you stop being in control of every second and start paying attention to every sense. The smell tells you more than the timer ever will. The color of the bark, the sound of a gentle sizzle, those become your cues. You stop watching the clock and start watching the food. That shift, from rushing to noticing, is what makes slow cooking feel sacred to me. When I first started outdoor cooking, I used to stress about everything. Temperature swings, timing, whether the meat would dry out. And sure enough, every time I hovered, I made it worse. The food always turned out better on the days when I trusted the process. That's the thing about slow cooking. It's built on trust. You prepare, you season, you set it, and then you let time do what time does best. You can't rush it, you can't force it, you just keep tending, checking now and then, adjusting if needed, but mostly letting the process teach you patience. And honestly, I think that's what draws me back to it year after year, because cooking slow doesn't just make food better, it makes me better. There's a calm that comes from standing outside with a smoker running. The rest of the world keeps spinning by, but you've got this one steady thing. A smell that deepens hour by hour. A fire that needs just enough attention to keep you present, but not so much that it demands control. It's balance, and it's beautiful. You learn a lot about yourself while cooking slow. You learn that not every minute has to be filled. You learn that flavor takes time and so does peace. You learn that the best results come when you stop micromanaging and start trusting. And you learn that the perfect recipe isn't really about technique, it's about rhythm. Every smoker, every oven, every piece of meat behaves differently. You have to meet it where it is. That lesson carries far beyond the kitchen. Because isn't that life too? You can season and prepare, but you can't control every outcome. You can check the temperature, make your adjustments, but some things just take time. And if you stand there trying to force it, you'll miss the joy that's happening while it cooks. That's what slow cooking has taught me, that time isn't the enemy, it's the ingredient. There's a point every Thanksgiving morning when I finally get that reminder. Usually it's when the turkey's been on the smoker for a few hours, the neighborhood's still quiet, the sun's barely up, I've got a mug of coffee in one hand and a digital thermometer in the other. That moment standing there, watching the smoke rise against the pale sky, feels like the truest start to the holiday. Everything else will happen when it happens, but right then, in that quiet space between tending and waiting, I feel grounded. And the funny thing is, nobody ever sees that part. They see the finished meal, the spread, the celebration. But for me, the best part happened long before anyone sat down. It happened in the stillness. That's the real art of slow cooking. It's not the recipe or the technique, it's the posture it puts you in. One of patience, presence, and gratitude. You're not chasing the clock, you're working with it. You're not multitasking, you're listening. You're not rushing to feed everyone, you're feeding yourself in the process. And I think that's something we all need a little more of, especially this time of year. So the next time you pull out the smoker or the slow cooker, don't think of it as one more chore. Think of it as an invitation to breathe, to listen, to let the food and the moment unfold in its own time. Because cooking slow isn't just a technique. It's a way of remembering that not everything worth doing can be done fast, and sometimes the best thing you can make this season isn't on the menu at all. It's the calm that comes from letting time do its work. If you've ever tried to pull off a full holiday meal in a small kitchen, you know what chaos really feels like. The counters disappear under mixing bowls, every burner spoken for, and the oven timer's going off like a smoke alarm. Someone's looking for foil, someone else is in your way, and the dog's convinced that today is the day he's finally going to get a piece of turkey. That's usually what I remember. Oh yeah, I have a smoker outside. Cooking outdoors during the holiday started as a space saver for me, but it turned into something bigger. It's not just about freeing up the oven, it's about freeing up the day. Because the second I step outside, everything slows down. The air smells different, the noise fades. It's just me, the Traeger, and a steady rhythm of tending and waiting. Meanwhile, the oven inside gets to handle the chaos, pies, casseroles, bread, while I stand under open sky remembering that cooking doesn't have to feel frantic to feel festive. There's a certain balance that happens when you split the work between inside and out. Inside is the heart of it all, warm, busy, full of laughter and clatter. Outside is the calm, the place you can breathe, check the temperature, and reset your brain before walking back into the bustle. In a way, that's what I think the whole holiday season needs, a little of both. A space for connection and a space for quiet. A warm kitchen full of people, and a patch of fresh air just for you. If you've ever cooked a turkey outside, you know exactly what I mean. It's not just the food that changes, it's the atmosphere. People wander out, drawn by the smell of smoke. They ask what temperature you're running, peek under the lid, maybe linger a little longer than they meant to. Suddenly, the cooking space becomes a gathering space too. Someone brings a cup of coffee, someone else grabs a chair, and now you've got this impromptu little circle where time slows down and stories start to surface. That's the part I love most about outdoor cooking during the holidays. It creates room for moments that wouldn't happen otherwise. When everything's indoors, the kitchen becomes a battlefield. But when part of the meal's outside, the energy shifts. The work starts to feel like ritual instead of rush. And the funny thing is, that same pattern shows up in the rest of life too. When everything gets cramped, our schedules, our minds, our emotions, what we really need is just a little bit of breathing room. A chance to step outside, stir the pot, adjust the heat, and come back in calmer than we left. Cooking slow teaches you that the secret isn't having more space, it's using the space you have intentionally. It's choosing where to put your attention. Just like you can't cook every dish in one oven, you can't hold every worry in one head. You have to spread it out, let some of it rest. That's why I think slow cooking is as much about mindset as it is about method. When you give something time to develop, whether it's a brisket, a friendship, or a dream, you're not just creating flavor, you're creating space for growth. And that's what I want to hold on to this season. The idea that making space doesn't mean doing less, it means doing what matters with more presence. It means saying, this can wait so you can focus on what can't. It means letting go of the pressure to do everything at once and trusting that what's simmering, literally and figuratively, will come together when it's ready. I've learned that the best cooks aren't the ones who fill every minute with movement. They're the ones who know when to step back, when to let the heat work, when to let the dough rise, when to take a deep breath and let the kitchen run itself for a few minutes. Because that's when the magic sneaks in, between the task, in the silence between timers, in that little pocket of calm that shows up when you stop trying to force everything to fit. So if this season feels crowded or rushed or too much, maybe try what I do. Move one thing outside. One dish, one conversation, one moment. Step away from the noise and let something cook on its own for a bit. Because making space inside and out isn't just about better food, it's about better energy, better balance, better memories. And honestly, when you sit down to eat later, you'll taste it. You'll taste the patience, the calm, the fresh air that found its way into the meal. That's the flavor of space, and it lingers long after the plates are cleared. There's this quiet moment that happens right before everyone sits down to eat. The house smells like every good memory you've ever had. Smoke, butter, rosemary, maybe a little cinnamon sneaking in from the pie. The table's finally set, the kitchen's a mess, and everyone's laughing or bumping into each other trying to help. And in that 5 minutes before the first bite, the whole day feels full. That's the part I love the most, because for all the hours of cooking and planning and cleaning, this is what it was for. The sound of voices, the warmth of the room, the way people start telling the same stories they told last year and somehow still laugh just as hard. You can taste the time in meals like that. You can tell when something was rushed and when something was cared for. And when you've cooked slow, when you've taken your time, the care is baked into every bite. I think food has a way of holding emotion. It remembers things we've forgotten to say out loud. And that's why holiday meals hit different. Because even if we don't put it into words, what we're really saying when we cook for each other is, you matter to me. And that's what I think handmade living is all about. Building, cooking, creating, giving. They're all ways of saying, I was thinking of you before you even showed up. When I think back on past Thanksgivings, I remember specific moments more than specific recipes. Like standing outside checking the turkey while the air was cool enough to make my breath visible. Or my mom coming out to tell me don't forget the rolls as if anyone's ever forgotten the rolls. Or sitting down at the table hearing the same mix of voices, the one who tease, the ones who tell stories, the ones who just sit quietly and soak it all in. It's easy to miss those moments when you're in a hurry. When you're just juggling plates or trying to get everything hot at the same time, the meal becomes something to survive instead of savor. But when you've cooked slow, when you've let the smoker handle the turkey or let a pot simmer all afternoon, you get that time back. You get to be part of the table again. I think that's the part so many of us forget when we're in the thick of it. The meal doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. The table doesn't have to be magazine ready. You don't have to make everything from scratch to make it special. You just have to be there. Because food isn't about showing off, it's about showing up. And when you show up with intention, people feel it. They may not notice the perfect sear or the smoke ring, but they'll notice how calm you were, how present, how you looked up when they spoke and didn't seem like your mind was still in the kitchen. That's the kind of presence slow cooking makes possible. It doesn't just feed people, it frees you up to be with them. I've had holiday meals where everything turned out perfect and I barely remember them. And I've had others where half the dishes were cold, the bread burned a little, and someone forgot the cranberry sauce, but those are the ones I remember most. Because those were the ones full of laughter and grace and second helpings of dessert just because we wanted to stay a little longer. When you think about it, food is the craft that gathers all the others. You build the table, you pour the wine, you cook the meal, and somehow all of it brings people closer. You can't help but slow down when you're gathered around something handmade. It holds you there. That's what I love about hosting or even just contributing to a meal. The way everyone brings a little piece of themselves to it. The cook brings time, the baker brings patience, and the guest brings gratitude. And together, it makes kind of an art that doesn't hang on walls, it just lives in memory. I think that's why at the end of a long day of cooking, even when you're tired and your feet hurt, you still feel good. Because somewhere between the chopping and the tasting and the serving, you became part of something that mattered. You created connection. And that's what gathering around a meal does best. It reminds us that we belong. So as you move through this holiday season, whether your table's big or small, loud or quiet, full of family or friends, or just a few people you love, remember this: the food is the invitation, not the focus. The focus is the moment, the laughter, the stories, the stillness. Because the best meals aren't remembered for what was on the table, they're remembered for who sat around it. Every year, the holidays seem to move faster. The list gets longer, the schedule's tighter, and before you know it, December feels like one long exhale you never quite finish. But somewhere between the timers and the shopping and the wrapping paper, there's always a moment that invites you to stop. For me, it's usually when I lift the lid on the smoker and see that swirl of heat roll out into the cool air. That sight, that smell, it reminds me that slowing down isn't a luxury, it's a decision. Cooking slow teaches that lesson better than almost anything I know. Because you can't rush a good roast or a smoked turkey or a pot of stew. You can't turn up the heat and expect the same result. You have to surrender a little to time, to patience, to process. And when you do, something shifts. Your pulse slows down. The kitchen feels calmer. You start tasting more than you measure. You start noticing things you usually rush past. The way the light hits the counter, the way the smell of rosemary fills the room, the sound of laughter drifting in from another part of the house. That's what cooking slow does. It brings you back to your senses. And I think that's what we all need most during the holidays, to feel the season instead of just getting through it. So if this year feels busy or heavy or like you're barely keeping up, here's your challenge and your permission. Pick one thing to cook slow. Just one. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be a roast or chili or cornbread in a cast iron skillet. It could be a turkey on the Traeger or a batch of soup that sits on the stove all afternoon. Whatever it is, make it slow and make it yours. Let it take the time it needs. Let yourself take the time you need. Step outside for a minute while it cooks. Feel the cool air, listen to the quiet, maybe look up and realize how blue the sky still is. Then come back in and check the food. Not out of stress, but out of curiosity. Ask yourself how it smells, what it needs, how's it coming along. You'll start to see the process mirrors you. When the heat's too high, things burn. When it's too low, progress slows. But somewhere in the middle, steady, gentle, consistent, everything comes together just right. That balance isn't just for cooking, it's for life. So maybe this season, slow cooking can be your reminder that pace is a choice, that presence is something you can practice, that a day can still feel full even if it moves quietly. Because in the end, the food will be gone, the leftovers will get packed away, the dishes will be washed, and the chairs will be pushed back under the table. But what will stay is how the day felt, and the feeling of a day built on patience, warmth, and time well spent, that's what lingers. So as you move through the rest of this holiday season, I hope you find your own version of slow. Maybe it's in the kitchen, maybe it's at the grill, maybe it's just 5 minutes with your morning coffee before the world wakes up. Wherever it shows up, protect it, hold on to it, because that's where the good stuff lives, in the slow moments that remind you you're already home. Thanks for joining me today at the Maker's Table. If you take one thing from this episode, I hope it's this: that slow isn't wasted. Whether it's a turkey smoking outside or soup simmering on the stove, the time you spend tending and waiting is never lost. It's the part that makes everything else better. So maybe this weekend you try it for yourself. Pick one meal, big or small, and let it take its time. Let it fill your home with warmth and your day with stillness, because that's what the holidays are really made of, the quiet in between the noise. Next Saturday, we'll pour a different kind of story with the bottle you'll want to open in January. We'll talk about the patience, winemaking, and why some things are worth waiting for, both in the bottle and in life. Until then, keep building, cooking, and creating at your own pace. Because the best moments, like the best meals, are always made by hand.